ultimately is that cohesiveness, the teamwork, the smart gameplay by Indonesia that allowed them to defeat China for the first time in 68 years. And after what Vietnam did in the 2022 final round of World Cup Asia qualifying on the first day of Lunar New Year in 2021, then now it's Indonesia's turn to confirm China's elimination from World Cup qualifying completely with one game to spare while keeping their own World Cup qualifying hopes alive. Indonesia have done it once again. Once again at Gelora Bung Karno, their formidable fortress, the Garudas have recorded their third successive win at home to keep their chances of qualifying for the 2026 World Cup in North America alive and are virtually assured of a place in the next round of World Cup Asian qualifying, where 6 remaining teams will fight for 2 more automatic spots in the groups, which will be held in Saudi Arabia and Qatar after they defeated China 1-0 in their penultimate Group C match in the third round of World Cup qualifying earlier tonight. A fantastic all-round victory for Indonesia that kept their hopes soaring as Ole Romani scored his third goal in as many international appearances at this stage of the competition. And for much of those 90 minutes, Indonesia looked like they played with a purpose, even without key players like Marcelino Ferdinand, Eliano Reinders, among a few others, and Martin Pace, the regular goalkeeper. But Emil Aldero, the Italy-based goalkeeper, he had a fine debut for Indonesia as he kept a clean sheet and played a pivotal part as Indonesia beat China in a competitive match for the first time in 68 years, I think. Yeah. In 68 years since they last defeated the same opponents in the 1958 World Cup qualifying way back on 12th of May 1957. This is their first win in a very long while. It ended China's unbeaten streak against them. And huge credit to the Dutch coaching staff for getting things right, particularly with their preparations. What more can I say? It is really quite an awesome feeling to see Indonesia conclude the World Cup qualifying campaign, all their 5 home games, with 3 wins, 1 draw, and a solitary defeat 0-4 against a world-class Japan, who have already clinched World Cup qualification a few months back. Now, focusing on the game itself, in the lead up to this game in Jakarta, both Indonesia and China viewed this match as a do or die game, because for both teams, winning this game was vital to keeping their slim World Cup qualification hopes alive. Indonesia were 4th in this group prior to this game with 9 points. Right now they have 12 after this superb, or rather this solid team performance in this 1-0 win over China. China were bottom of the group and are still bottom of the group on 6 points with only 2 wins in 8 matches, the rest all ending in defeats. And that included a 2-1 win at home over Indonesia last year during the World Cup qualifying away. At home, sorry. So these teams had varied approaches in the lead up to this game. Indonesia, having just concluded their Liga 1 2024-25 Liga 1 season, they had a 8-day training camp in Bali before moving to Jakarta, while China, they had their training camp in Shanghai before flying to Jakarta a few days before this qualifier. And Both teams having very varied approaches, but it was quite clear from kickoff which national team had a greater motivation to keep their World Cup hopes alive. And unsurprisingly, in front of the watching head of state, Indonesia President Prabowo Subianto, and PSSI Erick Thohir watching from the VVIP stands, Indonesia played like they were man possessed. They were keen to fight for every ball. They were keen to show that Gelora Bung Karno is more than just the fans merely becoming the 12 men with their excellent tifos and chants and fervent support. They played their part on the pitch, and it was helped that China was somehow needing to win to keep their World Cup hopes alive, strangely looking like a group of 11 strangers playing on the pitch, which included the current 18-year-old striking sensation Wang Yudong. Yeah. And China were also without their players their key players as well, with two of their players, including their key midfielder Lin Liangming, suspended for this game. But still, it was quite clear, especially after the opening exchanges, that Indonesia was steady in their gameplay, and the significant difference that they had improved from the Shin Tae-yong era was their approach after winning the ball or gaining possession, to play the ball on the ground, to play quick passing football, and to play those intricate cut through passes. And it helped that China look rather rigid. They look rather stiff, even though China head coach Branko Ivankovic had stuck to his preferred 4-4-2 diamond system, with only one DM anchoring in front of the back four, but still with rather awkward player selections, which would eventually be the cause of how Indonesia got their winning penalty goal. China played like they were playing together for the first time. Granted, there were several changes, especially with veteran Wu Lei not travelling to Indonesia due to injury, and one or two other key players, including Tyler Browning, or in China better known as Jiang Guangtai, sitting on the bench instead of starting. So it seems like an awkward combination of youth and experience in what was a pivotal game. And as for Indonesia itself, you can see that Patrick Kluivert and Alex Pastor, they have work out a winning formation. I think refining from the Shin Tae-yong era with a more advanced 3-4-3 attacking system, where previously the wing backs are now pushed further forward to complement in attacking 3-4-3 system. In this case, Kelvin Verdong and Jakub Sayuri are the ones fulfilling the wing roles this time, and with the usual three centre-backs, Justin Hubner returning from suspension to partner alongside Jay Izitz, the captain, and Rizky Rido. And in midfield, they had Tom Hay, the creative force, and Joey Paluplessis in centre midfield, with two local-born players, Egi Maulana Vikri and Ricky Kambuya, on either wing, supporting lone striker Ole Romani. And this is without one or two of the key players in Reinders and Marcelino, as I mentioned earlier. But the team cohesion was quite apparently clear to see from kickoff, from the way they were moving the ball forward, from the way they fought to regain possession, from the way they collected themselves to get back into position once they saw their attacking forays go to knots, at times squandering their chances after they got forward. And you can say that they were very persistent in doing the pressing from the get-go, from the first whistle, and that led to China receiving its first yellow card after Ricky Kambuya forced a foul from centre midfield Xu Haoyang. Yeah. And in the 20th minute, Romani got one of his few chances of the game when he actually attempted a half volley in a breakaway, only for it to shoot over, and yet another attempt that also went well over 3 minutes later. But it's quite clear to see that Indonesia played with a purpose. They were incisive in their possession, they were calculative, their passes were calculated, they had gone through they applied what they had gone through in the training camp and in those days leading up to this game. They applied Patrick Kluivert and Alex Pastor's instructions to the very full tilt, and more crucially, they were never sloppy. They were rarely sloppy throughout this whole 90 minutes. In fact, even after taking the lead and right at the end of the first half, Indonesia played as though they were still trying to score the first goal, and they came close again. And on that, I'll develop a bit on that later. So, back to Indonesia in the first half. Again, Romani, the pivotal guy who scored 2 goals in his first two appearances for the Garudas in the previous international window in March against Australia and Bahrain. Yes, the only goal against Bahrain came from him, and the third time from open play, he shot straight. That was Indonesia's closest attempt to breaking the deadlock in the first half after a superb 1-2 with Egy Maulana Vikri to thread the ball through for Romani to shoot inside the box, just that it wasn't well placed enough to trouble China's captain goalkeeper Wang Dalei. And despite a brief period of pressure from China in the first half, Indonesia largely were very comfortable because China were not that organized going forward. They played, unlike Indonesia who played with purpose, with a fluid system where players knew where they were positioned, where they were supposed to be attacking, where they were supposed to be moving, whether it's from your defensive position into attack or for the wingers to find the open spaces behind the fullback or to find the gaps in between the rather static Chinese backline, or even better, China playing, even though it was technically a 4-4-2, it looked more like they're playing with 4 or 5 people at the back and 4 or 5 people at the front, but without a coherent midfield to anchor defense and attack together. And that was crucial because without the anchoring of without an anchor who was able to hold the link together, and technically it was supposed to be Wang Shangyuan who was supposed to do it, but he dropped more into the back rather than providing the link. And Brazilian-born Jorginho, who is making his debut for China, he was unable to make much of an impact in the first half because more often than not, once China had the ball and they started making hasty direct passes forward, it was a case of a matter of time before Indonesia regained possession without much of a sweat, because Indonesia were able to just get the ball back thanks to all those careless mistakes by China. It's like it made China look really sloppy, and that sloppiness will cost the visitors really dearly in the 40th minute when a bad pass from their midfielder saw their fullback Yang Zepeng, I think Yang Zepeng, yes, correct, Yang Zepeng hits Kambuya from behind, even though the ball was clearly going out and there was no pressure for him to exert any kind of tackle on Kambuya, who was trying to chase the ball valiantly. A defender with better knowledge of that matter would have just stood up, let the ball go away, because he knew that Kambuya was not going to ever get the ball on the goal line at all. But for some reason, he chose to slide in without Kambuya even trying to force a foul on him. Kambuya did the first thing by trying to press the fullback into some kind of uncomfortable mistake or uncomfortable move with the ball that led to the ball going out of play. But Cambodia did not force the fullback to Shanghai Shenhua fullback to slide in. It was the fullback's own questionable decision making that led to the penalty. It was rather obvious at first, but it took a little while for the referee to agree to that assessment after reviewing the replays on the VAR screen. And as a result, Romania scored the obvious penalty, but questions were asked about Branko Ivakovic's selection because apparently the China player fullback who committed this foul had only made one start in 7 Chinese Super League appearances this season. So Chinese netizens weren't aware, like, why is this guy who is not even a starting 11 for his own club play in such an important fixture as a key player? I think in those Chinese netizens' minds, they couldn't understand, but still, no matter. First half done, into the second half, China were quite desperate already as they made 2 halftime substitutions and one more substitution before Indonesia finally played their cards from the bench. But it was quite clear that the same pattern continued from where it left off in the first half. Indonesia remaining composed, remaining disciplined, and with both the local born and heritage players playing together as one team, fluid on the ball, and moving with good tempo and playing rather fluidly, exploiting the spaces that the Chinese defense were leaving behind, as they were very unsure. The Chinese players were unsure of where to position themselves on the pitch for much of the game. It's very apparent that the Indonesians, local born and heritage, all knew where to position themselves with and without the ball, but not the Chinese. And that was why Indonesia played as though it was still 0-0, while China played as though they were leading 1-0 when it was the opposite. It's a bit unfair to say, but China did not deserve to get anything from this game. Indonesia, all their players who played on the pitch, including the substitutes, all played their cards right. Romania had a good game up front. That's why China brought on Tyler Browning or Jiang Guangtai to play as centre back in the second half. That's how desperate China were. They couldn't deal with it. And even after a bright start from their 18-year-old striker Wang Yudong, Indonesia found a way to keep him quiet, partially due to the young chap's inexperience. Yes, he can be a top scorer in the Chinese Super League, but against experienced opponents at international level, that is a very steep learning curve in his first international start and only his second cap for China, because the Indonesian defense eventually figured it out. Even Rizky Ridho, whose pace was a little inferior to Wang Yudong's, but his playing smarts and positioning made up for the lack of speed. So Indonesia as a whole, they kept things tight at the back. They were very fluid in midfield, mainly led by Tom Hay, and the tireless running by Pelupessy. The starting wingers were tireless running forward. They kept exploiting the spaces, the gaps left behind by a rather floundering Chinese backline. And even when the subs come on, if not for Tyler Browning's interceptions in injury time, defensive interceptions, China could have lost by 2 goals or even 3 goals. If the English-born China centre-back had not made these 2 crucial interceptions, when the whole China defense by then was all over the place, it's like they weren't sure whether to run back to stick to their defensive roles anymore or to just make a last-minute drastic push up front. So is Indonesia still keeping to their disciplined gameplay, but China totally having lost it already mentally, even before the final whistle. So ultimately, it's that cohesiveness, the teamwork, the smart gameplay by Indonesia that allowed them to defeat China for the first time in 68 years, and after what Vietnam did in the 2022 final round of World Cup Asia qualifying on the first day of Lunar New Year in 2021, then now it's Indonesia's turn to confirm China's elimination from World Cup qualifying completely with one game to spare, while keeping their own World Cup qualifying hopes alive with a 95%, as I speak at this moment, 95% depending on the result of the ongoing game between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia, to go through to the fourth round of World Cup qualifying. If Bahrain do not beat Saudi Arabia, Indonesia will secure their place in the next round of World Cup qualifying. And nonetheless, tahniah Indonesia for their third successive World Cup qualifying win at home, and even with their final game against Japan in Suita, it may no longer really matter, because with those crucial results at home, all the majority of their hard-earned points won there, Indonesia have rightfully and deservedly kept Southeast Asia's flag flying, and also their own flag flying high in their chase for their second ever World Cup appearance since 1938 as Dutch East Indies. Thank you, Patrick Kluivert. Thank you, Alex Pastor. Thank you to the Indonesian national team. They have kept Southeast Asian pride well and alive. All the local born players, all the heritage players in the squad, including Stefano Lillipali, who made his first appearance as a substitute in years, they have done a fantastic job on the pitch tonight. Job done, 3 points earned, fourth round almost assured, and hats off to them, really. Hats off to them for Southeast Asia's best ever final round World Cup qualifying third round World Cup qualifying appearance by many miles, really many miles, compared to Thailand and Vietnam combined in the modern era since the late 1990s. And with that, I think Eric Thohir should really take the credit for getting these naturalized players together, and also Shin Tae-yong and now Kluivert and Alex Pastor for making this whole Garuda's team work together fluidly as one. And I do look forward to seeing them in action, not just against Japan in their final third round qualifying game, but also the fourth round of World Cup qualifying. I think it will be tough, but the Indonesians keep their hopes alive, keep Southeast Asian hopes alive, and we are all looking forward to it. Fanaja is looking forward to it, so do everyone. With that, mantap Indonesia.